Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the full moon or Purnima that's happening on December 4th, 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrology perspective, or Jyotish as it's known as in Sanskrit, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. It seems like the theme for this moment in time is protecting your peace. So let's take a look. A note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. Okay, so just a few announcements and orientation, especially for those who are new to the channel. I'm offering an introduction level 1 Vedic astrology course in January that's starting the 14th of January. It'll run for 12 weeks on Wednesday evenings. And that's going to be on Zoom. So if that's interesting to you, you might email heartlightastra@yahoo.com for an application. The deadline to apply is 7th of January. And space is limited because this is a small group, but there's no astrology experience that's necessary to join the group. You just need to apply. So auto dubbing is available on this channel, and there are several new languages, Dutch, Polish, and Korean, in addition to the other languages listed here. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Sorry. Okay, sorry. My dog wanted to sit on my lap. Here you go. Yeah, okay. He was Jyotish. It is just BB. Yeah, okay. So, my channel's all about playlists. This particular talk on moon phases is going to be my Gochar transits playlist, but there are other playlists videos are easier to find. Also, if you'd like to learn astrology by looking at famous people, places, and moments in time, I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2025, where I list almost all the famous videos I've analyzed on the channels, and the videos you can find them in. But it's not always obvious from the video title if there are famous charts in that talk or not. Like my monthly videos, I always have like 3 famous videos, but you never know from this title that I talk about it. So, um, anyway, some of the newest videos I've posted, in case you missed any, Bharani, Nakshatra, Lunar Mansion, Sushubh, and Amala yogas, which are attractive combinations, and then planetary transits or Gochar for December 2025. And if you're new to all this and want to learn more and get a good foundation of Vedic astrology, I've listed some videos at the bottom of the slide that I would start with. So that you do get a solid foundation and can start learning and, use Solver to get more out of talks like this. Okay, so here's a blank chart for the time period of the full moon or Purnima that's happening December 4th, 2025. This chart is set for 18:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York time. That's the time zone I live in. But I just wanted to give everybody a chance to look at the chart without any of my markings or notes or whatever. So especially if you're a student, you can kind of, look at it yourself, take a crack at it, and then kind of check your notes, with mine and see what's similar or different. Okay. So when I look at a blank chart like that, like what's, part of my process here, well, I start looking for, I guess, where my eye is naturally drawn. And that's not just like a surveying type of process. It is partly because I'm looking for certain things, but also I'm just letting my eye wander um, and let it naturally be drawn to certain places almost more intuitively, I would say. So anyway, again, just some more detail for students who are learning. And, again, my process isn't, right for everybody, but it seems to work for me. So, um, anyway, what do I notice? What are the first things I notice in this chart? Well, I started looking at the lugna. If you're not familiar, this is a North Indian style chart. So the top diamond in the middle with the AS stands for ascendant. So the top diamond in the middle is called the ascendant or rising sign or first house in English, and in Sanskrit it's the lugna. Okay, and the lugna is very important because it sets the tone for the whole chart and also represents the general physicality and personality, psychology of a person if we were looking at a chart for a person. Um, And yes, and the little bottom 3 in the bottom corner, that's related to the third constellation of the zodiac, which is Gemini or Mithuna in Sanskrit. So we have a Gemini rising chart or a Mithuna lugna here. To get to the other houses, you count inclusively from the first house here and go up and to the left or counterclockwise. So the second chart is that upside down triangle in the upper left corner that's got Jupiter in it, and it's got a little 4 in the bottom corner. That 4 represents the fourth constellation of the zodiac, or Cancer or Karka in Sanskrit. Okay. So anyway, the first thing I did is I started looking at the lugna or the ascendant. Okay, and also specifically the lugna nakshatra. Since we don't have any planets sitting in the lugna here, we do have a couple that are. Well, we will have one soon, actually, within a few hours, because that Jupiter you can see that's sitting in the second house is at 2 minutes of Cancer, and it's retrograde. That line under Jupiter means it's retrograde, so it's backing up into Gemini, which it will be in Gemini in about 12 hours from this time period. So you can almost see it as like a Jupiter in the lugna here at Gemini. But the nakshatra, so nakshatras, there are about 27 of them, and each night the moon passes through a different one, and each nakshatra has a different energy and symbols and deities associated with them. They all have different energies. So the lugna nakshatra in this particular chart is Ardra. Ardra is symbolized by a drop of water, and that drop of water can represent sadness. So there can be some emotional turmoil here, that sort of thing. But also Ardra is that drop of water can be related to a storm cloud. So storm clouds, again, they pass through usually pretty quickly, kind of intensively, especially if there's like lightning and thunder and a bunch of rain or snow or whatever, hail, whatever they bring in. And then there's this like kind of pressure that's brought into the area. And then usually like after the storm's over, the next day, it's like everything's bright and clear and lovely. So there's this transformational energy, but it can also bring like, again, changes that are quick and sharp, both physically and emotionally and mentally. There can be this kind of emotional or mental insight that comes, like a lightning bolt in the head and the mind, that kind of thing. Like, for example, Einstein had Ardra placements, important Ardra placements, and he was a Gemini rising, Vedic astrology chart. So that gives you some idea. So just from the beginning here, we're looking at like an emotional storm or, insight potentially here. And it's going to be a dual one. So more than on more than one level or one side of things, because Gemini is a dual air sign. So that means that there's going to be contrasting ideas or dual ideas. So this might be trying to integrate or trying to acknowledge two different thought processes here. Okay. The other thing I notice, which is pretty nice, so despite this emotional storm that's going on, one thing that I notice is that on either side of the ascendant here, we've got Jupiter retrograde, which makes it strong. Even though what we call it Sunday, Sunday means it's, in the first or last degree of a sign. That makes it unstable because it's crossing signs, and when it crosses signs, it changes elements. So it's going from water sign here in Cancer, and it backs up into Gemini, which is an air sign. So that'll make it unstable. But Jupiter is actually exalted in the second house. So for Gemini people, Jupiter's been there for about 6 weeks or so. So probably there have been a lot of gains related to Jupiterian things, spirituality, publishing, speaking, truth, balance, that sort of thing. But also gains through work, because Jupiter in this chart is the lord of the 10th house of 9 to 5 activity, as well as reputation, and the 7th house of independent business and path forward in life and partnerships, both personal and professional. So there's probably some gains, and Jupiter has been aspecting the 10th house. So there might have been like a spiritualizing of, 10th house activities, which is again 9 to 5 work or activities during the day, also reputation, that sort of thing. Um, And as far as the 7th house is concerned, the lord of that, Jupiter, has actually gone 8 houses away. So there's still been benefit, but it's more of like a rethinking, reconceptualizing, and even again, re-spiritualizing potentially like independent business and relationships. even though there's probably not been a lot of movement forward, because Saturn is in the 10th house, and Saturn represents delays and obstacles, and it's aspecting the 7th house. But in any case, getting a little bit ahead of myself, but anyway, Jupiter is very strong and positive in a positive house in the 2nd house, so that's very nice. In some ways, challenging in others, I would say. But the other thing is Moon is exalted in the 12th house here. And Moon is full because it's exactly opposite Sun, so it's, full in full light, that sort of thing. So both of these in this chart are natural benefics. Okay, and as far as yogas go, and yogas are usually planetary combinations that give extra malefics for a chart. You've got this really strong Jupiter in the 2nd house, and then you've got this, really strong Moon in the 12th house. And so what this does is it creates what we call a shubakartari yoga. Okay. A shubakartari yoga, honestly, it's a little bit of a magical type of yoga. I mean, and I don't use that word, easily or loosely, but when you have these really strong, beautiful natural benefics on either side of the lugna, it's like there's protection there, there's opportunity there. It's almost like an open sesame type of, like the world is your oyster type of energy. Okay. Because you have these benefics, protecting and supporting the lugna, which again is the totality of the chart, the physical part, the mental part, emotional part, the way of doing things in the world. So yeah, even though there's a storm, it looks like there's like it's a strong, and maybe even mentally, emotionally, it might be challenging in some ways. There's some sort of storm that's actually beneficial here. Okay. And then in addition to that, so we've got that going on related to the lugna. And then we do have this Mars that's aspecting the lugna as well. Mars is in the 6th house here, which relates to acute issues and enemies and that sort of thing. And Mars actually represents enemies. So there could be kind of strong forces involved here, that have been challenging to, Gemini folks for the last month or so. Mars is also Sundi. Actually, we even call it Gadanta, okay? Because Mars is in the last degree of a Scorpio there, its own sign. So Mars, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. Mars is actually what we would call exaggerated condition for a bunch of reasons. Mars is in its own sign, which gives it strength, but it's combust, meaning it's so close to the sun you can't see it when you look up in the sky. So it's a Mars you can't see, and Mars represents things like action and bravery and physicality and that sort of thing. And it's also unstable because it's Sundi. And actually, we wouldn't call this Gadanta because they're of the different 12 Sundi points, the 12 different junctions between different constellations. 3 of the 12 are specifically Gandanta points. The reason, and they're even more unstable because there's a dual instability there. You're changing signs as well as nakshatras. Okay, because the nakshatras and the signs don't line up exactly except for at those 3 places. So it's a very exaggerated Mars. So it looks like there's been some inner, because you can't see Mars externally, but that means there's been some internal changes going on here. And Mars is in a nakshatra called Jyeshta. Jyeshta is symbolized by a talisman. So there's some notion of protection, either physical or spiritual. And I would say potentially both, because Mars is a physical planet, but Jupiter's aspecting Mars, and Jupiter's a spiritual planet. Jupiter's aspecting the 6th house here. So there's something related to inner transformation of physical and again spiritual protection here. Okay. And then the other thing is that again, this Jupiter is just about to slip into Gemini in the next few hours after this moment in time. And when Jupiter is in the Lugna, it's considered to be have digbala or directional strength. So that'll make Jupiter strong in that respect. Yeah, and Jupiter, whether it's in, it's kind of again on the line of Cancer and Gemini here. Either way, it's in the nakshatra Punarvasu. Punarvasu is symbolized by a quiver of arrows. So there's this idea of like sharpness, sometimes fighting, because it's a weapon, and then also the cycling energy of going back and forth, like shooting the arrow off and grabbing it and putting it back in the quiver of arrows, the box that hangs on the back of the on the archer's back, to contain the arrows and stuff like that. So there can be this like cycling back and forth. And again, this looks like, especially since Mars is aspecting Gemini from the sixth house, and even though Mars in a few days after this moment is going to slip into Sagittarius, it's still going to be aspecting Gemini, okay, for a good month or so, about 6 weeks, maybe even. So, Gemini folks are in kind of like, fighting mode, executive mode. Mars represents rebellion, changes, innovation, action, that sort of thing. So, Gemini is sort of going through this shakeup period. But luckily, Jupiter is shifting into a Gemini, so that should cushion, the effects of Mars, and also protect the seventh house, because Jupiter will be aspecting its own house, the seventh house, which is again spouse like partner, business partners, independent business, and path in life. So again, it looks like there's been some inner shifting and changing and contemplation going on, and now it's sort of action or go time in terms of implementing these things. Okay. So again, even though it's not obvious when you first look at the chart, Gemini rising here has both Mars and Jupiterian influences on it. Okay, and therefore the whole chart. When you get Jupiter and Mars together, that can be fighting, but like usually more of a good fight, I would say. Depends. It could be legal, law-related things, but also enthusiasm. And Jupiter and Mars together, this might be like spiritual actions. And especially because Jupiter is going to be aspecting the seventh house of Sagittarius, you can see even Mars is going to slip into Sagittarius in the next few days of this moment in time, but then you're going to get the rest of the parade behind it. Sun is going to shift, and Venus and Mercury. So by the end of December, you're going to get you're going to get 4 planets in Sagittarius with Jupiter aspecting it. Okay. So luckily, because that'll cushion the blow, there's going to be some. I'll talk about it in the next few slides or so. But there's some challenges here to all these planets, slipping and parading through Sagittarius. And luckily, Jupiter will be there to kind of take the edge off that and again spiritualize the whole process of what's coming up and transformation that's coming up and currently happening. So the Lugnatia, which is a ruling planet for the chart, is Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini. And Mercury is also Sunday. So we've got all these planets with 3 different planets related to the Lugna, the rising sign, which and alters are Sunday. So meaning that on those 3 different levels, there's going to be instability for Gemini folks, physically and mentally, emotionally. But Mercury's in the 5th house here of counseling, and Mercury's in a sign or nakshatra called Vishaka, which is symbolized by a victory gate. But this is the kind of victory that can be a little bit tough because it's like victory at all costs. So this might be somebody who's, dedicated to a certain goal or purpose or whatever, and they're willing to follow it through even if there's certain costs involved. Okay. So there might be certain costs. So that means that whatever this transformation storm cloud energy is, and then we've got the protection of Jupiter and Moon around the Lugna, and then there's Jupiter and Mars, aspecting or in related to the Lugna here. There's some success involved. And the thing is, Mercury's going to be in Vishaka, even when you see it's going to cross into Scorpion the next day or so after this moment in time. And then it's going to be in Vishaka for a while. And then it's going to be in Anuradha. So Anuradha is going to be about victory, but through forming alliances. So that'll take the edge off of this kind of sharp period. The other thing is that Mercury here is in the 5th house, which is a Dharma sthana. Dharma is means duty. So the orientation, like if this was a person, the orientation or primary motivation in life is to do their duty. Okay, and it looks like, this might be like especially this Jupiter and Mars together related to the Lugna, this could be like a peaceful warrior or spiritual warrior type of energy. but the transformation of one. Yeah. And then Mercury again is in the fifth house. The fifth house relates to counseling. So this could be like counseling the self, like potentially others as well. So I think again, this inner transformation that's going on, it's like how do we lead ourselves through our own lives through difficult periods here. Okay. But again, with Jupiter and Mars related to the Lugna, Jupiter brings wisdom. And then again, Mercury will bring duty, but success. Mars will bring protection of self, but at all costs. So again, and then Jupiter aspect in the seventh house will bring intuition related to the path forward, relationships, independent business, if any of that's involved, any and all of that's involved. And again, Jupiter aspecting its own sign in its seventh house. This is like following your North Star type of energy after this, deep inner transformation and counseling the self into how to lead oneself forward in a successful way. And again, I don't think the success in this particular chart means like a worldly success, but I mean like more of a inner success. Not looking for external validation. Or there might be a shift. Actually, that might be the shift here. Is maybe being more externally focused and oriented to somebody or a way of being that's more internally focused, and validated that way in terms of how do you feel and how, is there peace in your spirit and is there peace in your heart and is there clarity of mind? Because you can see that there's challenges here in this chart. Okay. But yeah, so that's just the first pass here. So, in evaluating a chart, where else would my eye go, or at least where does my eye go with this chart? Well, you can see that there's several, 5 out of 9 classic Jyotish planets that are in negative houses. We've got Ketu in the third house, Venus, Sun, and Mars in the sixth house, and then Moon in the 12th house here. So this creates what we call a Balavrishti yoga, which can indicate fragile beginnings. Like if this kind of combination happened in an actual person chart, they might have a difficult childhood and maybe so difficult they don't even survive childhood, that kind of thing. But which planets are here? Well, we've got Moon and Venus. Those are the two emotional planets. So, just from that, I would gather that there's some emotional, shift or change or, difficulty going on. The other thing is that Sun and Mars, those are the two leadership planets. They're in the sixth house of, again, acute issues and enemies and that sort of thing, acute problems. And Sun and Mars are both in that Jesta energy, that talisman energy, protection energy. So especially when you get Sun and Mars together like this in Jesta, that can very easily give like a physical protection, authority protection, by men specifically because they're male energy planets, nothing to do with gender, but a protective father, a protective sibling. That sort of thing, because Sun represents father, Mars represents um, siblings. But again, this is all happening in a Martian sign, Scorpio. So there's some transformation here. And again, Mars you can't see because it's combust. So on the surface, this looks like a head of state or leader of an organization who's being protective. But underneath, Venus and Mars here are both combust. So there might be again some struggle or turmoil going on because they're in very different energies. Venus is an Anuradha, so it's almost like a hyper Venus. Venus is all about social grace and being kind, compassionate, generous, diplomatic, that sort of thing. Mars is a rebellious planet, so Mars has its like haunches. It's in protective mode, so fighting mode even potentially. So um and then Moon, again, Moon is, exalted, and then it's in this really beautiful nakshatra called Rohini, which is the most attractive. So what's kind of interesting, is it's almost like this diametrically opposed, like physical protection and leadership and maybe even fighting and that sort of thing. But Venus is in a very positive nakshatra, and Moon is as well. So there might be some diminishment of emotions, or kind of difficulties or losses with emotions. But still, it's like somebody is seems to still be in a good place in an odd way, just because there's clearly some um, difficulties or challenges here. But it's like it's almost like this notion of like equanimity, being able to maintain an equilibrium, mental and emotional equilibrium, spiritual equilibrium, because Jupiter's well placed, Venus and Moon is, well, not exactly well placed, it's in the 12th house, but this could symbolize something like, an emotional or mental retreat, that sort of thing. Taking time off to, you know, rejuvenate, especially the mind, and emotions, that sort of thing. But again, Moon is in Rohini, Venus is in Anuradha. So, very emotionally lovely person, here, if this was a person. So, what else is going on? So, the third house, we have K2, K2 and Purva Phalguni. So, K2 can represent hidden, unusual things. And the third house represents like nonverbal communication. It also represents siblings and neighbors and courage and that sort of thing. And the lord of the third house is the sun, which has gone to the sixth house. So there can be acute troubles or even like a separation from sibling or neighbors, that sort of thing. But also, like for the Gemini person, if this was a Gemini person, like they've probably been doing some unusual things, and maybe even like with Purva Phalguni is symbolized by hammock or marital bed. So this could be somebody who, especially because K2 is on the 3-9 axis here, and the ninth house represents religion. This could be somebody, either Gemini or sibling or neighbor or something like that, who's kind of almost like in renunciate mode. Who's kind of separating, but also not only from people and kind of being separate physically and maybe emotionally, but they might even be sort of like letting go of the finer things of life, because that's something that poor Phalguni represents. Like socializing and good times and all this sort of thing. And K2 could be like sort of staying away from that or stepping back from that. Um, so yeah, and then again, the sun is in Jesa there, so this could be like unusual attempts or actions to lead or protect. Um, yeah, this Gemini person, and then the eighth house here, Venus, Anuradha, Sun, Swa, Combus, Mars. Yeah, so there can be again trouble with older siblings, because Jesa can also, besides being a talisman and kind of a protective energy, it can symbolize like being an elder. You know, so this could be like a elder statesman or elder leader or elder sibling, that sort of thing, who's in a sort of protection mode. But again, there's some trouble here because they're all in the sixth house of acute trouble. So, and Mars is not only lord of the sixth house, but it's the lord of the 11th house, which is clubs, group society, but also friendships. So this could be like, especially like established relationships, established groups that are kind of being having some sort of a, I want to say revolution. Revolution might be a little strong, but it might be a revolution. But some sort of internal change going on here. Okay. Um, and then also trouble. Oh, the other thing is, so the planets that are in these negative houses, what do they represent? Well, Venus represents spouse, Sun represents father, Moon represents mother, and Mars represents siblings. So there can be, again, difficulty with relationships related to these people, or all these people might be having trouble at the same time, which would again might be a reason why there's a Ardra in the top here, is that somebody might be spinning, trying to provide emotional support and comfort to friends and relatives who are having a difficulty here. um so this Moon that's exalted in the 12th house here in Rohini, again, it's a really beautiful energy, but it's in the 12th house. Again, it can be losses and expenditures, but also isolated places. That's why I'm thinking like there's like a retreat of some kind going on there. And this moon is aspected by Venus and Anuradha, and then Sun and Mars. So this might also potentially be a family trip as well. There might be difficulties making that happen because Venus and Mars are combust. So um, maybe it's plans that of people getting together that didn't work out. But the moon is also the lord of the second house. The second house relates to speech, but it also relates to family and inner circle. So especially with this moon, Venus, Sun, Mars, these are all inner circle people. there can be losses related to that, specifically mother, since moon represents mother. But there can also be like a beautiful retreat going on here. So it's a bit of mixed energy, but that's not surprising given that we have a Gemini dual air sign here. Yeah. But in the end, especially with Sun and Mars, leadership planets in this Jesta protective energy with Venus and Anuradha and Moon in Rohini. This is like, very much like protecting happiness, you know. Despite any circumstances, acute troubles, circumstances, what other people are dealing with or whatever, it's about remaining, the calm, collected, cool person who's like open and warm and generous despite whatever else might be going on. And again, I think there's not only turmoil for the people around them, but the person themselves, because again, this Saturn, pretty hardcore Saturn, that's Sunday in the 10th house, and Purva Bhadrapada energy, which is a funeral pyre energy, and Saturn represents chronic problems, delays, obstacles, that sort of thing, is aspecting the 4th house of happiness. But there's some success here because Mercury is the lord of that 4th house, and Mercury's in Vishaka. So this is almost like, again, protecting, maintaining, uh, happiness despite obstacles, physical obstacles that might be coming up. Okay, so what else did, again, I notice? Well, again, there have been challenges here for, Mercury rising people, moments in time, basically since Saturn moved into Pisces, which was the end of March. So there might have been a real kind of slowing down of daily activities and independent business and relationships and stuff like that. Because Mars, Saturn, as you can see here, I've had the arrows in here. Saturn's aspecting the 12th houses of losses, the 4th house of home, happiness, lineage, and then the 7th house of spouse, partnerships, independent business, and path forward. So, yeah, so since Jupiter is aspecting Saturn from the 2nd house, at least temporarily, or has been for the last few weeks, 6 weeks or so, there's been this spiritualization of the trouble and, frankly, probably destructive energy that Saturn's brought, and delays and obstacles, and probably physical destruction as well. And so, again, it's more about, how would I say, like, seeing like a more spiritual perspective on the changes and shifts and delays that have happened. Yeah. So Saturn again is in this Purva Bhadrapada Freemason fire energy. So there can be like losses, both physical and emotional, because again of what Saturn represents, as well as its aspect in the 4th house of happiness. But again, the 4th house also represents lineage and mom. So there's problems there. And then Saturn's the lord of the 9th house, which is dad. So probably lineage and parents in general have been suffering. And then partnerships, both personal and professional, because Saturn's aspecting the 7th house. Life path, that's 7th house stuff. And then happiness again is 4th house stuff. So Saturn's been, dulling the shine off those houses. And then also there's probably some literally physical restructuring going on. Rahu, I've also circled, because again, Rahu has been in this Purva Bhadrapada energy, again, the funeral pyre energy for a long time. And just the last couple of weeks has shifted into Shatabisha. Shatabisha is probably better than Purva Bhadrapada. Purva Bhadrapada is just full on like cremation, flames, destruction, turning things over. And Rahu is an ambitious energy as well as like a hidden, unexpected energy. So this might be somebody who's like, suddenly and ambitiously like restructuring or changing things, that sort of thing. Shatabisha is the energy of, it's literally translated as 100 healers. So now we're looking at like things that are hard to diagnose or heal or fix, but also like the symbol of Shatabisha is a circle. So it can be very abstract. So it can be like, again, initially like Rahu shifted into Aquarius in May. So since May, there's probably been this like almost like a wild frenzy of like shifting and changing things related to ninth house issues, which could be father, which could be enterprise or organization of some type, authority, religion, spirituality. And now it's like calming down in terms of the physical changes that happen. And now it's like, how do we deal with the like more sort of soft or ephemeral type energies associated with the shift and change? Okay. So, but now that Rahu has moved out of Purva Bhadrapada and Saturn has recently was in Purva Bhadrapada, like April, May, and June-ish, and then it shifted into Uttar Bhadrapada. So it looked like things were getting better because Uttar Bhadrapada is a backlegs or funeral power. Like you're starting to get some perspective and distance from the shifts and changes and life cycle that's turning over. But then it went retrograde and backed up into Purva Bhadrapada again. So it was almost like a reprise of probably stuff that happened last fall, actually. But now Saturn is not in retrogression anymore. It's going forward. So it's still in Purvadapada and will be for a couple months, but then it'll move out of there, Yahoo, for, almost 30 years. So there's still a few things that were left to shift and change and sort through. I would say both physically and emotionally. Emotionally, because Saturn's sitting in a dual, water sign, which is a dual emotion sign. So a lot of shifting through probably tougher contrasting emotions, and then Saturn's aspecting the fourth house, which is a dual earth sign. So literally this could be like a decluttering almost type of energy here, if not like a full-on like earthquake, which I think right when Saturn wasn't what Saturn was in no Saturn had been in Pisces, but when Mars moved into Virgo a few months back, and Mars and Saturn were directly opposed to each other, or mutually aspecting each other. And they both represent, land and property, Mars and Saturn. And there was like this big earthquake that happened like off the coast of Russia that made the news. It was a pretty big one. So that's right when that happened. Yeah, but now that Saturn and Rahu are basically moving out of or away from Purva drop energy, there should be like basically recovery is what I'm seeing here. Okay, so that was sort of a general overview of the chart. I was just going to go through house by house here. So for more info and detail, and then after that, I was going to go through the amshas or subdivisional charts, which give you more detail. So depending on how much detail you're looking for, you'll see what you want to see, I guess. So, all right, so here's the chart, and now we've got all the arrows in here at the same time, so which is probably more confusing. But again, that's why I broke it down into a few different bits before we look at the whole thing together. So yeah, again, the Lugna nakshatra is Ardra, emotional insight, potentially. Sun nakshatra is Jyesta, protective authority. Moon nakshatra, Rohini, beautiful mind. The day lord is Jupiter, and the Hora lord is Mercury. And what's interesting is we're running both of those planets as dasha period. So dasha period will give us an indication of which planets are more active or influential at a particular time. Jupiter represents, again, spiritual wisdom, and Mercury represents thoughts. And we've got these two planets lining up, or integrated here in the Lugna. But also, I would say, soon to be in the seventh house as well, because by the end of December, Mercury will be in Sagittarius, and they will basically be in parivartan exchange of houses. Jupiter will be in a sign of Mercury, and Mercury will be in the sign of Jupiter. So these two are going to get even stronger in terms of what's happening here, in terms of the turning over and transition that's happening here. So Mercury will be again in Sagittarius at the end of the month, December. So that will be helpful again to Gemini risings for the most part. But again, it's all about like self-transformation here. And again, Jupiter and Mercury, that also represents news, that also represents media, that also represents education, learning and wisdom, knowledge and, insights, that sort of thing. So a lot of mental and spiritual energy here. Besides, again, we're, directly looking at the lugna here when we were activating Mercury and Jupiter. So the specific dasha period, again, planetary period, is Moon, Mercury, Rahu. And Moon and Mercury are the two mind planets. Moon is the emotional mind, Mercury is the logical mind, and Rahu, again, is ambition and unusual things. So this could be like an unusual alternative perspective on things. Yeah. And even this could even be like an obsessive type of energy when we don't actually literally have Rahu, Mercury, and Moon together, but we do here in the dasha period symbolically. And so this could be like an obsessive compulsive type of energy, potentially. But this planetary period is shifting from Moon, Mercury, Rahu to Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, 19th of February, 2026. So a couple months out, basically. And so Jupiter here again we're swapping Rahu for Jupiter. I mean, that's a pretty big shift. What's also interesting is both of these planets are very strong right now. Jupiter's in a star of Jupiter, and Rahu's in a star of Rahu. So Jupiter and Rahu are very strong, but they're very different energies. I mean, and once Jupiter slips into Gemini in a few hours past this point, Jupiter is going to be aspecting Rahu. And so there's going to be a spiritualization of Rahu. The other thing is switching from Rahu to Rahu is an ambitious energy, can be devious, can be hidden, unexpected, that sort of thing. It's not always bad, but again, it tends to be a little bit more egoic, a little bit more devious, can be. And Jupiter, again, is like fairness, justice, balance, equilibrium, kindness, charity, all the good things, essentially. And so we're swapping this sort of egoic energy for more of a spiritual mindset here. And also, again, Jupiter literally, as it slips into Gemini, spiritualizing Rahu. Because Rahu right now, we have Mars on it. So Mars and Rahu together are going to be this, again, obsessive, compulsive energy. And now it's like Mars is moving out of there. It's going to take the pressure, it's going to take that Martian energy off Rahu and then shift it to Jupiter. So that's a pretty big shift. Okay. So then just in terms of the kind of social calendar these days, there are a few big, holidays that are religiously oriented and different, different areas of faith. But they all seem to correspond with what's going on here. So let me just talk about them. One is Dattatreya Jayanti. So Dattatreya Jayanti, basically, and this is in the Hindu faith, there's this notion that there are these deities that are associated with different aspects of creation. So there's Brahma, who's essentially responsible for creation of things. Then there's Vishnu, who's responsible for the sustaining of things. And then there's Krishna, or not Krishna, there's Shiva, who's related to the dissolution of things. So it creates like this cycle of life, the three deities. But Dattatreya is literally the Trimurti, the kind of integration or wholeness of these three deities coming together. So there's this integration and wholeness related, related spirituality. And then we have, hopefully I say this correctly, entrance of the Theotokos into the temple. So Theotokos is the Virgin Mary. Okay, and Theotokos literally means in Greek. So this is from like the Greek Orthodox tradition. Um, uh, Mother of God. Okay, so apparently when Virgin Mary was quite young, she was taken to a temple in Jerusalem by her parents, and basically her life was dedicated to the service of God, and then she stayed there and learned the spiritual arts and that sort of thing. And then eventually became the, mother of Jesus, who's considered to be, God in that tradition. So even here, like there's this notion of like spiritual dedication of self, which I don't think is too far off from the energies I'm seeing here in this chart. Especially once Jupiter shifts here, Mars is there. Again, spiritual warrior, peaceful warrior, that sort of thing, And then not too long after December 4th, December 8th, I believe it is, there's Bodhi Day, which is a Buddhist holiday, which is celebrated as the day that Buddha became enlightened. So again, these things of like integration and surrender and spiritual service and like transcending the mundane, I mean, that's all here in this chart. So that's pretty interesting. I thought that was pretty interesting. So anyway, I'll go through the houses now. So the Lagna again, Gemini or Mithuna, dual air sign, Dosha Vayu. So we have a retrograde Swa, Digbala Jupiter, and Punarvasu. So this is again, since Jupiter literally on the line, 2 minutes. I mean, it's basically in both the Cancer and Gemini at the same time. So this is like going back and forth spiritually, aspected by Swa, Combust, Mars, and Jesta. So there's like internal, protection going on here. Success, wisdom, um, spiritual protection actions, but with a cost, I would say, because that's picking up that Mercury and Vishaka energy, initiating or innovating troubled work or independent business, because that's Mars. Mars is going to, when it comes into Sagittarius again in a couple days after this, Mars is going to be in a nakshatra called Mula, which is symbolized by a bunch of roots tied together. So that's all about planting new seeds, but especially when you have like natural malefics going through there, like Mars, this could be like uprooting old seeds. Because because you see the lines here, like Saturn's aspecting Jupiter, or not aspecting Saturn's aspecting Sagittarius, and Mars will be in Sagittarius aspecting Saturn in a couple days. So Saturn and Mars are going to mutually aspect each other. Saturn and Mars together bring like an engineering energy and like even like a manufacturing type energy. So this is gonna, like, when I see Saturn and Mars in um, Sagittarius, and Mars is gonna go through Mula. This is like about ripping, like weeding things or taking roots, ripping things out by the roots. And the thing is, luckily, Jupiter will be aspecting all this to take the edge off of this and like spiritualize it. So whatever's being uprooted here is for spiritual reasons. The other thing about this, again, I talked all about this in my December transits video. So if you really want to get into it, I get into it there. But Sun is, again, in about 10 days after this, is going to be in Sagittarius as well. And once Sun gets into Sagittarius, we're going to get 5-9 aspects by Ketu. And Mars and Sun are in Mula. The star of Mula is Ketu. And then you have a Ketu aspect. So there's going to be all this like unusual, you know, spiritualizing of kind of shifting and changing and uprooting things that might be, kind of fast and furious and unexpected and kind of intense. And again, you're going to have the two fire planets in a dual fire sign with Saturn and Ketu. You're going to have four natural malefics here in Sagittarius, a dual fire sign. So that's going to be a lot of shifting and shaking up. But again, luckily, there's going to be some, grace that's given because Jupiter is aspecting its own sign here. But again, the second half of the month of December is going to be pretty tumultuous, I think, for most people, especially related to your Sagittarius house, whatever your Sagittarius house is, even if you're not a Gemini Lugna. But for Gemini Lugnas, Gemini rising people, their 11th house, or their 7th house is going to get like tossed and turned around. So again, spouse-like partner, business partners, independent business, and path forward in life. But again, this uprooting of old things and shifting of old things, all with this like new kind of clarified, clean spiritual perspective moving forward in a positive way. So, then those planets are going to move through all these planets. Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars are all going to run through Sagittarius. And then middle of January, they're all going to be in Capricorn, which is going to be all about like deep psychological shifting. But anyway, that's getting too far ahead. We're talking about the full moon today, right? So, all right. So but you can see all this going on here. So physical obstacles, that's a Saturn. Internal effort, that's the combust Mars. Planting new seeds, weeding the old. Frenemies, I would even say, because again, this Mars is the lord of the 11th house of friends, but it's in the 6th house of enemies here. So again, this might be shifting your perspective on if somebody's, I don't know if it even has to be like friend and enemy, like literally fighting. It could be, but it could even be like, is this person really, I wouldn't say serving me because that sounds kind of selfish in a way, but it's like, is this person, contributing to my life in a positive, uplifting way? You know what I mean? Like, this could be like going through your Rolodex, or Actually, I just found myself doing that the other day, is like going through some, like social media accounts and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't even know who these people are. Like, what, like, I don't know, like, should I stay connected with them? And so, like, actually, I went through and, some of them I was like, I don't even know who these people are. So I disconnected, you know, um, just to clear space and stuff like that, like energetically clear space. And I think that's, again, what's about to happen for Gemini in a pretty big way. So not just things, but, people, relationships, partnerships, all kinds of stuff. It's a big clearing, decluttering thing here, both internally, I think mostly internally, and then, externally as well. Yeah, but then, the law might be involved here. Enthusiasm, inspiration, that's the Jupiter and Mars combination over the 1-7 axis. We do have a Balarishta yoga here. We have a bunch of yogas. Balarishta, again, there's a fragile beginnings here, which we already know is fragile because Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury are already Sunday. So we know that there's some shifting, shaking, going on here. Shubakartari, again, that Jupiter moon is going to give some protection. And again, despite all the changes and stuff going on, is going to help a lot, to move things forward and overcome whatever might show up here in terms of obstacles or problems. Chandra-mangala yoga, that's property and wealth. That's the moon and Mars relative to each other. We have a solar yoga here. That Mercury is going to help boost moon, or sorry, not moon, but sun. So that's going to bring like a positive reputation, eloquence, that sort of thing. We do have a kahala yoga here, so this will bring a leader of leadership, leader of leaders energy here. So all this change and transformation is actually going to be in support of other people and their development. We also have a sushubh yoga, which I just did a video on that. But that's this massive positive Jupiter in the second house here. That'll give, positive speech and positive, spiritual inner circle. And it'll give, positive reputation related, especially to, I think, positive spiritual speech here. And then the thing is, this massive Jupiter is aspecting the 10th house of deep psychology. So this is going to be a person who's known not only for their, wise words, but their strong, deep spiritual orientation. Yeah, so there's a lot of positive stuff going on there. The chidra grahas, so the chidra grahas are planets of vulnerability, and they happen to be Venus twice over Mercury and Jupiter. So again, I don't think this has gone without hitch here, especially because there's a dual air sign at the top here. So it's not like this has all gone smoothly. I think it's almost like a two steps forward, one step back type of energy where it's like, how do we integrate, the mundane world with spiritual world? And Venus represents a spouse and relationships, and Mercury is the self, and Jupiter spirituality. So again, the sticking point here might be like, how do we kind of present ourselves um, to others and our friends and family and that sort of thing, um, as our new updated spiritual selves, because there might be pushback here. I mean, people might know you in a certain way for a long, long period of time. I know when I've gone through different changes in my life, like even the people who, have been the greatest supporters in some ways, like you start changing a little bit and then they start making comments, and even if they're not pushing back hard, they're remarking on things. And you may not be as available to them, or you may, again, like talk differently or want to talk about different things or do different things because you have more of a spiritual orientation now. And that might kind of ruffle their feathers a bit. So that might be the sticking point here with these chidragrahas. But also these represent spouse, friends, and kids. Also Venus and Jupiter are the advice. Um, Planets and Mercury and Jupiter are the communication and education planets. So again, it's like, how do we advise and update, our relationships, close relationships here? Then in terms of wealth, the yogi is Ketu, and Abhi yogi is Rahu, and the duplicate yogi is Mars. So what's interesting is Yogi and duplicate Yogi represent wealth-giving planets, and Ketu and Mars are the two rebellious planets here. Doing things in a unusual way. Mars is a rebellious planet, innovative planet, and Ketu's like Mars, but with even a more of a weird twist to it. So doing things in rebellious, unusual ways is going to bring wealth here. And what is it? Also, Ketu represents releasing things. And Mars and Ketu are both unconventional planets. So wealth that's based on releasing, conventionality, essentially. And then Avi Yogi is Rahu, which I talked about, is all about ambition and kind of like ego and ambition. So like letting that go and then spiritualizing things and doing things in a very, again, a new spiritual way that's not so ego based. Yeah. So in the second house here, the second house lord is full moon in Rohini. There's a retrograde Sundi, Swa, Jupiter, and a Gandanta Mars aspecting here in Mula once Mars moves into Sagittarius in a couple days. This is going to be inspired speech. So we're switching actually. There's going to be a big shift in the way somebody talks because Jupiter's here, retrograde, exalted in the second house. And then it's going to slip into Gemini. We're going to lose this Jupiter in the second house. And then Mars, once it moves into Sagittarius in a few days, is going to be aspecting. And so we're going to have the exact opposite energies because Mars is debilitated in Cancer. And Mars is a fighting planet. Jupiter is all about diplomacy and fair. So even the way, and again, the second house represents family and inner circle. So this could be like going along with things and then switching things up to like, no, I'm not doing things the way you guys are used to me doing things. So there's going to be a big shift there in the second house. This could also be like, this is also a house of finance and assets here. So this could be like, doing a pretty good job saving and earning money in the second house, especially saving to, strange, unusual patterns of spending, saving, also eating. The second house is like eating and stuff like this. And so with Mars in the second house, especially Cancer debilitated here, this could be like unusual eating patterns or eating processed food or food that's not like the greatest for you, as opposed to like staying on like some very beneficial, healthy diet that Jupiter gives in this Cancer house in the second house. So again, a lot like almost like a 180-degree difference in second house issues, which again we've been seeing, in various ways in the chart. So going from inspired speech gains through work, reputation, independent business, finance, goodness, balance to sudden disruption, inner circle, angry speech, assets, spending, and nourishment, like eating. This is upsetting the apple cart, second house. So hang on to your seats at Gemini rising. The third house here, the Lord is Sun and Jesta, Ketu, and Purvagani. I mentioned this unusual actions and means of communicating physically or non-verbally, separation of older siblings and neighbors, renunciation or stepping back. This could even be law enforcement. This might be a sibling who's involved in law enforcement. Could be like chief of police. This could be like a chief of police type energy. Yeah. So anyway, fourth house here, fourth house Lord is Mercury, aspected by Saturn, Purva Drapada. Bringing order to home, unhappiness, trouble with mother, education, decluttering. These are things I mentioned before. So yeah, a lot going on here. That's shifting and changing as well. But now we're moving in a positive direction related to all this. Okay, so on this slide, all the stuff on the left is the same, just my notes for the other houses are on the right. So the fifth house here, fifth house Lord is Venus and Anuradha, with again Sunday, well, soon to be Sunday, Mercury, and Vishaka aspecting. Wait, let me back up. I'm confusing the fifth and sixth house. So the fifth house here, fifth house Lord is Venus and Anuradha. There's a Sunday, Venus, and Vishaka there, aspected by retrograde Swa, Jupiter, and Punarvasu, once Jupiter slips into Gemini. So again, spiritual counseling, talk therapy, mantra, yantra, using these sorts of methods to, support spirituality. There can be recent trouble leading to a positive network here. So this could also be like some issues with kids here because Venus is the lord of the fifth house, which represents kids, and it's gone into the sixth house. So this might be developing a positive, um, network of people to help children, which are, again, struggling a bit here. Then the sixth house lord is a Swa, combust Mars in Jesta, with Sun also in Jesta, combust Venus, and Anuradha aspected by the moon and Rohini. So leading, protecting, positive emotions and feelings, even creativity, because Moon and Venus are aesthetics here, through troubles and again, rising above the fray, maintaining equanimity through these challenges going on here, and positive emotions, positive vibes. In the seventh house lord is Jupiter. It aspects its own sign. Mars will be in Mula soon, aspecting all this aspected by Saturn, Purva. So recovering from loss, but like structural, physical delays, and then reconsidering, restructuring. A wise approach to move forward with partners and business. Moving forward. Then the eighth house lord is Saturn, aspected by a debilitated Jupiter, at least temporarily, attempting to remain optimistic through difficult times, inner turmoil, long-term issues regarding work. At the ninth house lord is Saturn. We have Rahu and Shatabisha aspected by Mars for a while, soon to be Jupiter. Ambition, authority, government law, conflict, the physical and spiritual, and now things are becoming more abstract. The 10th lord is Jupiter, aspect its own house temporarily. Saturn is there, and then there's a mutual aspect with Mars pretty soon. So salvaging emotional losses, spiritual daily acts. So especially in the last 6 weeks, Jupiter has been sort of bolstering Saturn in a way, creating sort of shifting the motivation of the things that are going on here in the 10th house, so spiritualizing that. And then now with Mars coming in, this is going to be a reconstruction project of work and reputation and path forward in life. Then the 11th house here, 11th house lord is Mars, aspected by Mercury. And then again, successful talk with friends, inner trouble. There might be some passive, aggressive fighting or competition going on here. A protection defensive mode. And again, this might be switching like material orientation to more of a spiritual duty or orientation here. Then the 12th house here, the 12th house lord is Venus and aspects its own house, which will provide some protection. There's an exalted moon there, also aspected by Sun and Mars. So this could be losses through mom or family, because moon represents mom, and moon is the lord of the second house of family, inner circle. But some protective actions here, leadership. Sun and Mars are leadership. Protecting emotions, staying in a good heart space despite all the shifting and changing going on here. So we see that over and over again. Okay, so now what we have here is we have the subzodiacs, amshas, subdivisional charts, all different names for the same thing. What these are, they're derived from the main natal chart. They're basically take the houses and slice and dice them into smaller pieces here. But these are mostly used for timing. So I have the dasha period listed here at the top. Moon, Mercury, Rahu currently for this full moon, and then Moon, Mercury, Jupiter starting February is 19th here. Yeah, again, so I've circled these planets so we know what we're looking at. But the first pass of all these, the analysis of these subzodiacs is to see if these planets are in positive houses or not. Okay. And again, each of these subzodiacs is related to a different area of life. So here on this side, we've got Navamsha D9 for spouse and partnerships, and the Draconia D3 for siblings. So already we know there's probably issues with both, right, from the main chart. So we'll just see what else, we can see from these. So the Navamsha D9 spouse and partnerships, Jupiter's not well placed, but exalted in the sixth house of acute problems. So Jupiter's doing what it can to ameliorate problems, especially since it was Saturn. But this is like spirituality resolving issues and fear, because Saturn can represent fear. Then we have a Swan Mercury plus Moon in the fifth house of counseling, aspected by Mars. And these are all soul enemies, so there's issues here. But again, Mercury in its own sign can often indicate meditation. and even like chanting mantras and that sort of thing. So this might be somebody starting a meditation practice. Rahu and Mars are up here in the second house, and again, the second house is a material house, of gains and assets and stuff like that. So this could be, especially during the Rahu subperiod here, there could be like a real ambitious push towards more, again, mundane world goal type things, more on the material plane. But then once we shift, because again, what we're running here is Moon, Mercury, Rahu, and then it's going to switch to Moon, Mercury, Jupiter. Okay, and the sixth house where Jupiter is a house of freedom. It's a moksha sthana. So we're moving from driving really hard towards material things towards, let's let this go. Let's heal this and let this go. So we also have a Swa Venus in the ninth house. So partner relationships of faith, that's the ninth house. And again, that could be, again, related to all the shifting and changes through relationships that's obvious in the natal chart. The Lugnatia here is Saturn. Saturn's in the sixth house here. So again, acute issues with partner and spiritual support. So again, that's not surprising given the main chart. Then the Drake in a D3 here for siblings. Moon is not well placed. It's off in the 12th house again. But its disposer landlord is a Swa Mercury. So already we're seeing like two Swa Mercuries here. That alone is already showing us that Mercury is quite strong. And Mercury, again, when Mercury's in its own sign, that indicates two different things. One, usually a drive towards independent business and entrepreneurship, but also meditation, possibly even Buddhism. And this is just the start of it. You're going to see it over and over and over again as we go through the subcharts. And again, as I mentioned, a few days after the 4th, on December 8th, is Bodhi Day, which again is the day that Buddha apparently became enlightened. So again, it's not too surprising to see this really strong Mercury in this chart, I don't think. Moon's not well placed. So again, this could be like a mental emotional retreat. Rahu and Mercury are in the ninth house, so this is very similar to the main chart. But the thing is, let's see, there's this drive towards ninth house issues, which can be enterprise, but also government. So again, like I mentioned, it could be that the sibling is involved in law enforcement, that kind of thing. But there could also be this kind of like more almost egoic drive towards meditation, Buddhism, sense of duty, kind of an obsessive nature here. And then when we switch to Jupiter, Jupiter is exalted in the 10th house with a debilitated Mars. So that's going to pull this Mars up. So again, Mars and Jupiter together, this is more like yoga. This is karma, yoga, spiritual acts of service and stuff like that. So switching from more of a real egoic drive, almost obsessive way to more inspired action, is what we're seeing here. So yoga, meditation, spiritualizing, before it was like erratic actions going on with this Mars debilitated in the, 10th house. It's like, can be very back and forth when Mars is debilitated like that. But then Jupiter's going to smooth that out for the D3. So on this slide, we have the Saptamsha D7 for children, Dwadashamsha D12 for parents, grandparents. So again, we would assume that these are going to be challenged, and there's challenges here as well. So the Lugnatia for this D7 is Mercury. It's not well placed, but it has a Swa disposer of Mars. But it's a Karko Bhavanasha Mars. This is going to be a Mars in the third house will bring problems with siblings, so maybe the children, if there are multiple children involved, this could be they get along with each other. But Mercury in the 8th house will bring changes and endings of some kind. Then we also have a Karka Bhavanasha debilitated Jupiter in the 5th house, aspected by Venus. And these two are soul enemies, and Jupiter also is Karka Bhavanasha. This can be a problem with children as well. And then again, there's some advisement going on here, Venus and Jupiter. So again, there's problems with children. Rahu's in the 10th house here of daily action and material gains, which again, once I counted them up, and you can see Rahu's in the D12 as well. This could be, again, this kind of like ambitious drive in daily actions, as opposed to like more of a spiritual orientation, So yeah, backing up a little, this Venus and Jupiter, this would be like spiritual, practical advice going on here. This could be like trying, I think this could be like trying to conceive a child, potentially. That hasn't worked out, at least for the time being. Yeah, so ambitious daily action, practical, spiritual, practical advice. Yeah. And we have three planets in the Lugna here: Sun, Saturn, and Moon is aspecting here. So this is an important issue. Children in general. Then the Dwadashamsa to D12 for parents, grandparents. Well, there's Moon right at the top here, so there's going to be problems with mom, which we're not surprised because Moon was in the 12th house. Jupiter is not well placed, but it is exalted, so there should be some sort of positive change or ending. And the thing is, there's a party of arts in between Moon and Jupiter, so there'll be some protection of these things. Moon in the Lugna, issues with mom, Jupiter, Moon, party of art. This could be spiritual teachers, since this is a dual fire sign chart here at the D12. This could be two different kinds of families or grandparents. This could be spiritual teachers who are seen as as spiritual mentors that are seen as sort of a second type of family. That's what I was seeing here. But again, highly intuitive, alternative thinkers. This Moon and Jupiter in the first house and the eighth house here. This is really, strong. Swa Mercury with Rahu in the 10th house. This could be like ambition towards like a daily meditation type activity or Buddhism, again. Four planets in the Lugna, again, another important chart. Leader of spiritual discipline, because we've got Moon, Sun, Saturn, and Jupiter in the Lugna here. So spiritual discipline. Again, dual sign. I mentioned two types of family, probably biological and spiritual. The fourth lord is also Jupiter. So there's a deep alternative spiritual lineage that's involved here as well. Yeah, so. Okay, so on this slide we've got sub-zodiacs, amshas, subdivisional charts for a D10, Dashamsha of career and reputation, and Ekadamsha D11 for public support and income. Okay, so on the top chart here, doggy's back in my lap. Hey, sweet baby. Yeah. Snuggly mood today. Yes, thank you. All right, so in the D10, all grahas are well placed. So at least that's a nice, start there. But check this out. I mean, we're running Moon, Mercury, and Rahu, and then that's switching to Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter. And Moon is Swa in its own sign, and Jupiter is also Swa in its own sign. And then this massive Jupiter in the fifth house relating to counseling is aspecting this Swa Moon where it's exalted. So, again, we're getting spiritual, counseling, and then, this kind of spiritual minded enterprise, which is like amazing. I mean, and those planets are amazingly strong, and they're both in Dharmasthana, so duty houses. And then if we kind of roll back a little bit, where's Rahu? Rahu's in an Arthasthana, so material house, 10th house, 9 to 5 work and reputation. So during the Rahu period, there was this like, obsessive, move in that direction. But then when Jupiter shows up in the dasha period, whole thing really shifts, dimensions even, I would say, Um, so yeah, so that's, the D10 is really, really amazingly strong, especially during this Moon, Mercury, Jupiter period. So, and that again, it might be the beginning, if not the beginning or, strong development and growth of such an enterprise. Then the Ekadamsha D11 for public support and income. Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter are not well placed. So now we've got the opposite going on here in a way. But let me explain. So then we have Mercury Swa in the 8th house. So there's some change or ending, probably a good change or ending, and also some alternative thinking here. But look, we've got a shubakartari yoga around the lugna again, like we do in the natal chart. We've got Venus on one side and Moon on the other. Unfortunately, Moon is with a debilitated sun there, but the sun is Banga which pulls up the debilitation of Sun because Saturn, which is exalted in Libra there, will pull that debilitated Sun up. So it's still a fairly strong, 12th house here. And yeah, and then this Jupiter is also aspecting its own house where Venus is. So when Jupiter comes alive here, is online during its, sub period, dasha period, there's going to be a lot of good growth going on here. But the fact that Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter are in negative signs, what I was saying with this is that, again, since this is about public support and income, I was saying that again, it's like the internal focus here is really, self, really more of an internal validation rather than an external validation. And it's not that there's not things here, but you can see Rahu is in the 11th house and it's a expositor Mercury swa, so that's nice. But there's this drive or ambition towards groups and income. Okay. And then with Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter, we're getting again shifts and changes in the mental emotional realm. Yeah, it's almost like a release or kind of relinquishing kind of external validation in the form of public support and income. Okay, not to say that this won't be, challenging, because we've got 6 out of 9 planets in negative houses. And again, the three planets in the second dasha period are all in these negative houses. But again, it's not, I would say, all bad, and again, the shubakartari yoga should protect to some degree, this whole chart here. So the shubakartari yoga should provide protection as well as opportunity. So with Rahu, again, drive towards groups, marketing, social media, income. Jupiter will spiritualize the material, efforts here. Mercury will bring alternative thoughts and actions and meditation. And then the moon with the Bunga sun and exalted Saturn, Jupiter in the 12th house. Again, this is spiritual discipline and healing the mind and body. So again, this might mean also that whatever this enterprise is, it may not be a local enterprise. Like maybe it's actually got an international reach. So, that's a little bit different, than most people would expect. Yeah. So on this slide, we've got the Chatra-chamsha D4 for assets and Siddhamsha D24 for education. So on the D4, we have Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, not well placed again. And again, this is kind of like the income, the D11, right, where these 3 planets were also not well placed. But again, look at the 8th house. 8th house, you have an exalted Jupiter with Mercury. So there's still positive thoughts going on here, despite what some people might see as like, the tower moment where things are blowing up and that sort of thing. But it's like, again, what we were seeing in the natal chart was like things were tough and challenging. But again, if it was a person, they're maintaining their equilibrium despite everything kind of, crashing down around them potentially, and we're seeing the same thing here. Like, assets, most people would be pretty upset about that, if you're not running good planets. But, again, Jupiter is exalted and Moon is debilitated, but it's with its dispositor because Mars is aspecting its own house. So there's still strength in these houses here, these negative houses. So the moon in the 12th house, especially with Mars there, this could be like a mental retreat and detox because Scorpio's there. Scorpio can represent like, toxic environments and stuff like that. So the other thing is that this moon is the lord of this house with Jupiter and Mercury in the 8th house. So, actually there's like this like replenishing of mind, and alternative mindset going on with this mental detox here. And again, this could be like, again, if somebody's decluttering, maybe they're like in this, type of minimalist mindset where it's like, I'm better off when I let go of things because these things just sort of bog down my mind. They bog down my subconscious and then I have more things to dust and organize and, pack away or unpack or clean or whatever. And, some people, when they're in this kind of, minimalist mode, what they want to do, they just want to lighten their life and lighten the things that all these sort of, you can think of as like energetic strings that are tying their mind to the material world in ways that are not productive. They're just, yeah, really depleting in a way. Yeah. So, and then let's see, Rahu and Mars in the ninth house again. Uh, this could be, in the Lord of this ninth house is Sun in the sixth house. So it's like acute problems with obsessive authority, lacks health, balance, and soul. So this might be, if it's not the person themselves who's, driving this ninth house Rahu business. And again, we have Rahu here in the ninth house, and then Rahu in the main chart in the ninth house. That could be like some kind of obsessive boss who's difficult to deal with, and causing problems, just kind of a headache boss. Um, yeah, so, but this, I would say, this obsessive authority lacks health and balance and soul. And because again, the sun is in the in the sixth house here, they're not doing things from that deeper perspective, they're just trying to grab as many goodies and points as they can, which has its own merit and own place, but, I think at the expense of, everything else. Because again, look, it's like, what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 9 planets in negative houses in the assets category. So, and Saturn's there. So, what is Saturn going to do? Saturn's going to oppose the sun, and it's going to add more problems and cause problems. There might be some land involved. So this person might have some land. But, again, there's not a lot of happy emotional energy related assets. So again, this might be the kind of person who's happier, like, giving things away and, traveling lightly through life. Then the D24 is the damsha for education. Moon and Jupiter are not well placed, but Jupiter's exalted again. So this might be some kind of spiritual retreat. That might be the education. More of an informal education rather than a standard, college or, master's degree or whatever. The moon is with a debilitated sun. So again, there's some changes with mental, emotional health, I would say. And then exalted Rahu in the fourth house, ambition towards alternative tradition or lineage. And then we've got a Swa Mercury. So, we're looking at like group meditation and Buddhism again. So, and again, Moon and Venus, the two emotional planets, are negative houses. So the education planets, Jupiter is exalted and Mercury's Swa. So there's education here, but again, I think it's more of a like, finding some alternative spiritual lineage and going on retreat and doing group meditations. That kind of education is what's being seen here. And then on this slide, we have health amshas. So we have the D6 for acute issues, the D8 for chronic issues, the D27 for strength and resilience. So in the first chart here, Mercury is not well placed, but it's Swa in the third house, so this is going to be a positive change or ending. In the Lugna, we have Rahu, Ketu, Sun, and Moon, so there's going to be some obsessive energy going on here again. And then there's a parivarta between Jupiter and Venus, and then they are with an exalted Saturn in the fourth house. So this is like structuring home and happiness, but Jupiter and Venus all over the chart, again, there's going to be a lot of counseling involved here, but like potentially in an obsessive way. Okay. So again, when Rahu is being run as a sub-period, there's going to be a lot more of this like, ambition of self since it's in the Lugna. But that can cause mental imbalances because Moon is on with Rahu and Ketu there, even though Moon is Swa. Rahu, Ketu, and Moon, or Moon with either of those planets, can signal like mental health issues. Okay, so there's again some kind of obsessive drive. But then once Jupiter, that period rolls around, we're going to get more of the practical advisor who's, improving the fourth house of happiness and improving the sixth house of acute problems through spiritual means and practical means rather than this kind of scrambling, energy. Then there's D8, Moon, Mercury, Rahu, not well placed. So you can see, like, again, these planets are not the best here. So chronic issues, not surprising for the chart that we saw in the beginning. The moon at least is exalted, and it's with Rahu and Ketu, which will be Banga here. And there's actually, yes, a parivartana between Venus and Rahu, which will pull those up. There's a Balarishta yoga here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 planets out of 9 negative houses. So again, there can be chronic issues here, physically, mentally, emotionally. Jupiter is in the 5th house, aspecting the Lagna. So again, during the Jupiter subperiod, things will, spiritualize, and there'll be more optimism and, more of a spiritual perspective on whatever challenges are going on, and bring a bit of lift and optimism and grace to whatever, issues are going on here. But again, you can see like Mercury and Moon and Sun, Ketu, Rahu, those are all on the same axis. The 2 mind planets and the health planet. And the other thing is that Saturn is aspecting there as well. And when you get Sun, Mercury, and Saturn together, that can indicate pain, because Sun represents the central nervous system, Mercury represents the peripheral nervous system, and Saturn represents the neuromuscular system. So, yeah, a lot of pain, mentally, emotionally, physically going on here. Then the Bamsha D27 for strength and resilience. Again, we've got another Shubakartari yoga. We have 3 of those. That's really unusual to have 3. I don't think I've ever seen a chart or, layout like this where 3 Shubakartari yogas in the main chart and the 2 subcharts. It's pretty phenomenal. So again, there is amazing, probably really unusually amazing strength and resilience here because of that alone. And specifically, the planets that, organize or create this yoga, Shubakartari yoga, are Jupiter, Moon, and Mercury, which are running. So that means that there's going to be, despite, again, the challenges, some resilience here. Jupiter is Banga, so it's debilitated, but Banga because Saturn is with it, it's dispositor. But again, there's spiritual discipline and gains, family assets, and speech here. Rahu is in the 4th house, again, another material house, so drive towards but elusive happiness, probably. But you can kind of see here, like when the mind settles, the spirit is at peace, essentially. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty amazing. I mean, Venus is Swa. What else is going on? I mean, we're not running Venus, but at least there'll be some, probably some support, social support here. But yeah, I mean, Rahu is gonna, again, be kind of an obsessive energy here, but elusive. Whereas Jupiter, Moon, and Mercury, because in the beginning, right, it's Moon, Mercury, and Rahu, and those planets are the weaker set of the Jupiter, Moon, Mercury that create the Shubakartari yoga. Even though Jupiter's debilitated, it's Banga because of Saturn, and it's also in a positive house. So to really lift and, pump up the Shubakartari yoga, running Jupiter should help that. Yeah. So then on this slide, we have spirituality and worship. And again, we've been talking about that the whole time, and probably no surprise. So we've got the D5 Panchamsha for innate spirituality, ethics, and morals, and then the Vimshamsha D20 for formal worship down below. So in the D5, Rahu's not well placed. Again, unusual obsessive troubles, but it is in Parivartana with Mercury. So there'll still be some organization to the potential chaos Rahu can bring to acute troubles as well as groups and income. And then, so again, this could bring like group meditation and Buddhism, or the kind of things that can help, the acute issues and kind of obsessiveness going on. And then we've got Jupiter exalted with a Bunga Mars in the 4th house. So again, this is going to be bring a lot more optimism when Jupiter runs. Also, you could see spiritual lineage and yoga, those sorts of things being activated there. Jupiter, let me see. And the other thing is that, the moon its dispositor is Jupiter. So when Jupiter is active and strong, that's also going to activate this moon in the 9th house. So again, the idea of like public spiritual duty organization comes up. Yeah. Then in the D20, well, first of all, we have a Vargodama Lugna. It's the same rising sign as the natal chart. So that already means that this subchart's important. But then look at how many planets are on this, Lugna here. We've got Mars, we've got Sun and Moon aspecting. There's a Parivartana between Mars and Mercury. So that means that Mercury is going to be in the Lugna as well. So that's 4 planets. And then there's a Parivartana between Ketu and Jupiter. So basically in the Lugna, we've got Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Sun, and Moon. So, the 2 education planets, the 2 communication planets, with Mars, enthusiasm, drive, and then Sun, the 2 leadership planets. We have the 2 mind planets. So you can see where this is going, right? There's like education, leadership of education of the mind, and, mind-body medicine, actually, potentially here, because the Sun is involved as well. So, this is a very, very important chart, which again is not surprising given the, main chart. Yeah, so Mercury's not well placed, but it is protected because it's in Parivartana with Mars. And then this Parivartana between Jupiter and Ketu will bring a lot of spirituality and detachment kind of energy. Like, again, it's like this, being in the world but not of it type of energy. Yeah. So, yeah, pretty interesting stuff here. So when I went through and looked at all the charts, again, I like to kind of tally these up, but you could see that there, some things were trending pretty strong here. So Moon was in 7 out of 14 charts was in a negative house. So again, trouble, mental, emotional trouble, public maybe even. And 4 times Moon was in on the 1-7 axis. So it's like a main feature, the mind and emotions. And then twice it was in the 9th house. So again, picking up that, religion and enterprise type energy. And then Mercury, 8 out of 14 charts, more than half, Mercury was it was SWA in its own house. So again, deep throughout all these subcharts, meditation, Buddhism, and entrepreneurship showing up. And then Rahu, 6 out of 14 charts, was in an Artisthana. So again, material drive, in half the charts when Rahu's running. And then Jupiter, 10 out of 14 charts, was either SWA or exalted. I mean, you saw over and over again Jupiter basically, really coming in and improving things tremendously, bringing optimism and spirituality. So yeah, pretty amazing stuff here. And just seeing how the subcharts, support and, differentiate and, kind of add subtext to the main chart here. So as always, thanks so much for stopping by and listening to one of my talks. I appreciate all your support for my work in the channel and, all the ways you guys do that, subscribing and liking and chatting with me in the comments and sending in donations, subscribing, all that, sharing videos, it's all very much appreciated. So thank you for your efforts on that side. Again, all my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology on my consults playlist, they can be found there. For famous charts, look at my birth charts archive list 2025 video where I list most of the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. I do offer individual birth chart readings, and I have that astrology class coming up in January. So if any of that interests you, email heartlightastra@yahoo.com for more info. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, as well as yoga, homeopathy, and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. All right, so as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.